We are live. We are live.
Are
Yes,
live.
we are.
I never get tired of saying that. We are live. So, welcome to Porch Talk Live Worldwide with my girl Stacy Paley and my other girl, the fabulous Camille Robb. So glad to see you guys. I'm telling you, we live in different states and stuff like that, but I'm telling you, there are times that I'm like, man, I really want to talk to them. I really want to share some stuff. And then when I see you, we're always online. I got to do better. I got to drop you guys a text or something saying, hey, look, yeah, I know. Now you know what happens, right? You get a thought and you say, well, okay, I'm gonna make the call. I'm gonna call because you know what, I want to share this with Stacy. you know Camille, I saw your show, okay, and I don't know why I'm not getting pinged, so I got to go back and look and do something. That's why I don't show up, because I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know when
Tell
it's
me.
coming forward. But talking about the young lady that you had on there, my God, it was just awesome. It was so awesome. We'll talk about that later on in the show, but I loved her guest. She had a young lady on. Okay. So now here's the thing. Let's talk about when Porch Talk Live shows up. Stacy, why don't you tell everybody when they can find us and where they can find us at?
Well, it is every Friday, 10 a.m. Central, which is 11 a.m. Eastern. Oh, I'm sorry, that's 10 a.m. Pacific. 10 a.m. Pacific. Camille was looking confused. Any of you listening, you're probably confused. 10 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Central, and 1 p.m. on the Eastern Seaboard and time zone. Every Friday from now into December. We are delighted that you're here. Please post. Let us know your thoughts. We're looking forward to talking with you again. We had a little break for the summer for July, and we are back. Well, we had that exciting Women of Influence event just, was it last week? It seems like a while ago, but it was just last week. That was fun.
It was amazing. I really, really enjoyed everything. We got a special guest that we're going to bring to the platform as we continue to share with you. I want to tell you about some things that we have coming up. So we're going to say hello to Ruth Ann as
Hi,
we begin to
Ruthanne.
move
Hi.
Hey, good
forward. Looking
morning.
Good
forward
Well, for
morning.
to
me, good morning. For me, good morning.
yeah, well, I'm looking forward to our conversation today with Ruth Ann. And guess what? We do like we're supposed to only do 3 events per year, but I think we've done probably about 5 or 6 so far. But we've got one more for the year, and it's called Celebrating Women of Influence. And I'm telling you, I know that there has to be some females that are in your life that have influenced you in some sort of a way, that whether it be a coach, a mentor, a friend, a family member, it could even be a neighbor, but someone that has caused you to do a bow face, change some things about yourself, how you talk, how you look, how you act, or even change something in your lifestyle. So we're celebrating women. That's September the 23rd at 12 p.m. And I am so looking forward to this event because the keynote speakers that I'm going to have is the amazing, dynamic three sisters from Women Prosperity Network. Now, as far as my team is concerned, I'm telling you, there's no better way for me to celebrate them than tell them how thankful I am that they've hung in with me. Me and Stacy have been doing the talk show 2 or 3 years now,
Yep.
and things come up and we get busy with our own things or what have you, but we seem to still stay connected regardless. And then Camille Rob came along, and when Camille came along, I was so sure she was going to be gone by January, but she
Ah,
hung in there. Yeah.
oh, she's
Yeah,
gone
I
this year.
wasn't
Yes,
sure.
this
Look,
year.
she is up and coming and doing some great things, getting ready to have her own TV show. But you know what? I'm trying to hold tight to them, okay, and not let go. So I celebrate these two women now because I love these women, okay, and what they stand for. All right. So we don't all do the same type of business, but we can come together and support one another, and that is amazing. I'll put the information in the chat about the celebrating women of influence in a few minutes. Okay. So that is actually what's on the horizon for Women Rocking Life and Porch Talk Live worldwide. And as you know, the events that we give, even though they have a tagline like Celebrating Women of Influence, they all come under the umbrella of Friends and Family Reunion. Okay. So come by yourself or come and bring someone with you. We're asking you to share. Okay. Once again, it's Celebrating Women of Influence, September 23rd at 12 p.m. noon Central Time. Thank you. So now it's that time. Let's welcome our guest, Ruth Ann Warnick, and I'm glad to have Ruth Ann here. Now, Ruth Ann has a great share for us today, but I want to go through her bio right quickly so you kind of understand what's going on. So, Ruth Ann has gathered her family stories for several years and began to understand the importance and value of capturing these stories and experience in the past and sharing them with the next generation. Like many others, she regrets the questions never asked and the time not taken to get more of the stories now lost forever. And I think that's something that we all regret. I get a chance to share with you about some things I was sharing with my son yesterday because of Ruth Ann. And her goal became inspiring and helping others to take action now to avoid regret and create a legacy for their families. Ruth Ann has 30 years of leadership in a national women organization, advancing from the local to the regional. She has been able to lead, engage, mentor, and train other women to become leaders. Ruth Ann has led many workshops and guided others in writing and sharing their stories and experience. She works with clients to record their stories, take action, stop procrastinating, and avoid regret. When Ruth Ann is not busy capturing stories, you can find her hiking or walking, getting her outdoors, or working and relaxing in her garden. Ruth Ann founded Capture the Journey in 2013 after becoming a certified guided autobiography instructor through the Barron Center for Autobiographical Studies. And at the end of the talk, we're going to tell you how you can capture her free giveaway. So before I get to talking, because I'll just take it away, Ruth Ann, just kind of share with us a little bit about you.
You're muted.
Ruth Ann, we can't
Ruth
hear
Ann, you're
you.
muted.
We want to hear your story.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
There you go.
Okay. So it really began when my father passed away over 20 years ago. And I realized that when he passed away, that we lost so many stories and so much family history. Fortunately for our family, his brother was still alive and is actually still alive now. And I was able to glean so many stories from him. But it became so clear at that point that we didn't expect him to die, although it wasn't sudden. It was not at a time where we could at that point gather any stories. So knowing how much I regretted the loss, that obviously the loss of losing my father, but the loss of that connection to my grandparents and great grandparents just became so obvious to me. So I really just started collecting our own stories. And when I would share with people what I was doing, that regret piece came up over and over and over again. Oh, yes, I agree with you. I wish I had asked more stories. I wish I had more information. And it became very clear to me that that regret piece was a big part of it for a lot of people, which really came down to not getting around to it. It's just, yeah, someday I'm going to get to that. Someday I'm going to do that, and someday never comes. So, and then we regret. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. If I can inspire, help in any way, someone think about it differently, take it on one little snippet at one story at a time, then I feel that they are blessed, and I've given them a blessing.
Ruthanne, do you ever find that people don't want to start telling their family stories or their earlier stories because it brings up, fear of mortality or anything like that? And how do you get around that?
So I find a couple of things. In the older generations, a lot of times they feel that their life wasn't very interesting and that they don't really have very many stories to tell. So for some of them, it's just helping them see it through a different lens. And
Mhm.
sometimes that can come from me, but actually sometimes it comes from their adult child, where the adult child really wants to have those stories and has to impart that sense of importance and value to the aging parent or grandparent, so that that person understands that their stories really do matter and that there is an important legacy, and that they didn't have to be a famous person to have meaningful stories, because as we know, you can't be a human being without having meaningful stories from your life, whether they were things you overcame or fun things you did, or just, it's just part of being human. The stories come with it.
Do you find that it's easier to get stories out of folks at different ages, or is it sort of this just depends on the person?
So I have found that the older someone gets, and so I'm not saying that someone is old at 50 or 60, I'm just saying the older someone gets, the more they are thinking about, whether consciously or subconsciously, they are understanding, let's put it that way, that they have more years behind them that they have ahead of them. I mean, it's a fact. It's not disputable.
Right.
So there's this reflection that starts to come as you age. Not just what have I done with my life, but also what can I still do with my life?
Yeah.
And this whole reflection piece really helps form the stories that they end up wanting to share, because they're able to synthesize the important stories that they want to make sure get passed on or shared, whether it's life lessons or just what they were like as a teenager. I mean, it's up to them to really determine what's the most important thing that they feel is leaving a legacy of who they were, or who they became throughout their life. So it's pretty individual to each person, but I would say there's definitely an age factor. And what I like people to think about is that the younger generations, for the most part, everything's a generalization, but they don't realize that we could be creating a gift for them that they don't know yet that they want. They won't know till later, and they'll be so thankful that they have it. So it's a gift that we can create for the future. Thankful that they have it.
Wow. Wow. I love that. I love that. So I've got a few questions for you. Thank you, Stacy, for taking that over while I was posting. The significance of documenting and sharing family stories. And you say there are so many benefits to sharing stories. And I know yesterday, one of the things that I did was I was talking to my son, the oldest one, and in talking to him, I was sharing about our grandparents and our great grandparents, and something that I have not done before, but he was really intrigued, and I started telling him about his grandmother, not my grandmother, his great
Mhm.
grandmother, and his great grandfather, because they both had passed by the time he was born, so he didn't know them. And then I started sharing about our great grandparents. And as I'm sharing about them, then it dawned on me, wait a minute, we've got some first cousins that they've never met, I
Mm.
never talk about.
Mm.
Okay, so we started sharing about that. So kind of share, I mean, I know I'm sharing, but kind of share what you feel is so beneficial about sharing the stories.
So it's beneficial for different generations in different ways. So for the older generation, it's saying you matter. We want to know, and we want to make sure that down these stories from generation to generation. So it's not a validation. It's just a way of saying to an older generation that we want to make sure that we carry you with us into the future. Again, knowing that there is a mortality involved here. So, for the younger generation, as I was saying earlier, when I say younger, I'm going to say anything below, below even the age of 30. Let's say they. It's not that they're not interested in the stories. It's just not an important part of their life in terms of capturing the stories. But the way that they're influenced by the stories is definitely a part of their life, because all of our family stories influence our own identities. So the stories take on a different meaning for different age groups. If you're kind of in between the let's say you have living parents and you have children, then you're that in between where you start to realize the importance of those stories, that you're going to lose your parents and grandparents' stories if you don't take the responsibility. Really, I see it as a responsibility, but if you don't take that responsibility to intentionally pass it down, and that's one of the challenges with just telling the stories versus intentionally capturing the stories, by which I mean either recording them or writing them or both. You could write them and then record them, but there has to be an intentionality to it where the goal is actually capturing, preserving, and sharing them beyond just conversation.
So true. I remember my mom was a pastor, so I remember a cousin of mine and her fiance coming to my mom to talk to her, get counsel before they got married, right? And in the conversation, we found out that he and her were first cousins.
Mm.
It was not a happy moment. It was not a happy moment, you know. So I think that sharing stories, that's one of the benefits of, especially when I hear people talk about, oh, I got a sister or a brother and we haven't connected in years. And now I've got children, they've got children, but they don't know each other. Okay.
Mhm.
So everybody that has the same last name is not kin to each other, but there are people out there that are related to us that
Mhm.
we have no idea who they are. My son told me the other day that a friend of his married a cousin of his. They've been married for a long time before they found out. Well,
Wow.
I mean, there's no reason to separate now, but it was a shocker. It took something for them to um just really to engage with the idea that, oh my God, what's going on? What's happening here?
Mhm.
I don't know, but it is what it is. So both the person telling the story and the person receiving the story, they're connecting generations and creating a priceless legacy of non-financial wealth. You want to speak on that for a moment,
Yeah,
Ruthanne?
yeah, that's how I like to refer to it as a kind of non-financial wealth. Again, passing with the concept of passing it down from generation to generation, and that's what families do with money and other assets. And
Mhm.
I
Hmm.
I like people to think about this as another form of wealth for their family. And again, so that we can avoid that regret piece where I wish I knew more about my parents or my
Yeah.
grandparents. And sometimes we know the facts. And I'll give an example of on my father's side. His parents both came from Eastern Europe and they met in the United States, and so they have what might be called a classic story where they are Eastern European. They got on a ship, they came through New York, they settled in that area, they lived in the Lower East Side. And so there's a narrative that goes with that, but it's really, to me, those are just the facts. If I don't have the personal stories, like what was that really like for you, which is unimaginable to us, like
Yeah.
thinking of, we're talking about, you didn't just get on a plane or call someone on a cell phone. Like what was involved in that, and why would you leave your whole family behind for something better in another country? So those are the stories to me that are so important in terms of getting to know your family and who they were and what they went through. So it is a kind of a wealth. That's how a generational wealth. That is really absolutely how I view it. And like I said, the younger generations won't appreciate it until many years later, but it is still something that's important to pass on. So that's how I define it.
Okay, I want to ask the people that are watching to comment below. Are there some stories that you believe need to be told in your own family that you haven't shared yet? Okay, and I'm not talking about the embarrassing stories and things like that. I mean just general stories. So, like me sharing with my oldest son yesterday about his great parents and the great grandparents that he knew nothing about, really didn't know their name because really there was just no reason really to talk about it. And we
Mhm.
made a decision that we would pull from my mom's family somebody out of all the brothers and sisters, there's seven of them, pull somebody from each family and start to record who's in that family. So we recorded yesterday who everybody that was in our family, okay? And we're going to forward that off to the other members of the family or what have you. And we're coming together next week at a family reunion to just
Oh,
sit
wow.
and just talk. Okay, you
Mhm.
started this, Ruth Ann. You started it.
That's beautiful.
You know,
Wonderful, Dorothy. What a legacy. You're talking about legacy and
Yeah.
keeping that connection across generations, across, as you're saying, across different kinds of family members. It's really, really wonderful.
Absolutely. Go
And
ahead.
one of the things that does is that even though many of them may not have met, and it's possible that after this reunion, some of them might not ever see each other again, the connection of knowing that you are part of this family in and of itself, that, and then you're all coming together in and of itself is of value to someone just in terms of their own self identity, that their connection to people is far beyond what they know right now or have known in the past. So it does have an impact that goes to the connection piece that family stories and family trees even can have. Family trees are kind of data, but what you're doing is you're allowing that family tree to really come to life, literally, like, and be able to share stories. I hope that in part of your process is to have those stories recorded, like especially, let's just say, your parents, for all of the people who knew your parents in some way. You knew your parents in a certain way. A niece or nephew knew them in a different way. Siblings to your parents knew them in a certain way. And just to be able to hear all those stories, but be sure and record them. It's so easy today to do literally with your phone. You just want to make sure you
Absolutely.
go off to a quiet place. That's the only thing is limit the background noise, but capture those stories. Again, you have to be intentional about it. And this is something that I work on myself. I mean, I have lots of regret about stories I didn't get, and I have to be intentional myself and like, oh, you need to make sure you do this. I mean, it's an ongoing process, but the value, I mean, it's really not measurable. You just can't take a measuring tape to it.
Okay. Before you go any further, let me kind of recognize some of the people that have stopped in. Tamika Jones says, yes, I agree. So much history, family, and true family documentation seems lost within some of the cultures. Why is this? It then makes it difficult to connect the dots and relay it to the generations of today where it doesn't get lost. How do you go back with broken pieces of information of our history? I'm going to give you a chance to answer that. Hold tight though. So then we've got, I'm not on all the platforms, so that's probably why I can't see everyone. I'm making special efforts to connect. Someone says, Constance. Oh, okay. So they're saying hello. Let's see who else we got here. I met relatives I did not know since moving to Georgia.
Great.
So what you're talking about is very, very relevant. But let's go back and all right, so somebody else sent one. My siblings grew up in North Carolina, and back then we used outhouses. Raise and kill the chickens by wringing the necks and cook fried chicken. And I remember my aunt made homemade ice cream. Let me tell you, I remember my grandmother making me churn butter on the front porch. Now that you said that, okay. But I want to see if you can answer Tamika's question. How do we go back with broken pieces of information of our history?
So Tamika, you might be referring to like the genealogy part of it. So that's a whole different ball game, as they say, in terms of. But there are lots and lots of resources on the genealogy. If you're referring to the stories, it really comes down to interviewing any family members that you that obviously still living, that you can interview, and that can be emails. That's how I got a lot of our family stories from my uncle. We emailed back and forth. He shared what he had. He connected me to other family members. So there will be different family members who will remember or know different pieces of your family history, and you can gather it from them.
Absolutely. I would just say start with the oldest relative that you
Yes,
know
agreed.
and work your way forward and just get the information. And like Ruth Ann said, sit with your telephones, put it on either on record if you just want the voice or video, and just have a conversation. And when you get a chance to, just get it all documented down somewhere. I was thinking about photos, yesterday, and I was like, you know what? I got all of these photos, but I never bothered to put names on the back of them. So now I'm going to go back, take those photo albums out, and start recording the names on the back of it, and actually the year that I'm recording the information on.
Mhm.
So our next question, um, and then I'm going to give Stacy and Camille a chance to talk. What do you mean by documenting and sharing, and where would someone start?
All right, so those are very important questions. So documenting, I'll break it down. So documenting is can be anything from taking photos that you have of family members and making sure that they are captioned on the back. And that's the data part. It's not story, but it's at least important data. Who it was, where it was, when it was, any information that you have. So make sure that those are that they have the information with them. They might be in your phone, however you want to caption them so somebody knows who, what, when, where. Sharing, it depends on if you're talking about you've recorded it. So this is not a one and done project. This is not just like, okay, I'm going to do this once and it's done. But if you're recording, like literally on your phone or through a Zoom conversation or something like that, the sharing really depends upon you. Are you looking to share it broadly so that anyone in the family can log in and see it? Or are you looking to create something for your children, like literally as a generational for your line of your family? So it's not a simple question to answer because it depends on what you want out of it. What was the third part of that? Oh, where would someone start?
Hmm.
So I actually, that you'll mention it later, but I do have a download that you can get. It's called 7 No Tech, Low Tech Ways to Start Capturing Family Stories starting today. And it talks about some of these simple things like your phone, a Zoom recording, emailing back and forth. A few of the things that I've already talked about. That's where you would start. And then, once you have that document, then I have lots of different tips and ways that I share. I just recently started a Facebook group for sharing different ideas of how do I do them? What do I do with them? And the answer is how big a project do you want? Do you want to end up with a book? Do you want to end up with just recordings? There there are too many options to get into in this call, but that's where I help people either through tips, like I said, through my Facebook group, or once you get my download, then I will be regularly sharing other gifts and other tips and different ways to capture and share.
Okay, third question. We'll do that. I'm going to give Stacy and Camille a chance to comment. Camille, go right ahead.
So one of the things that I have problem with is the families that do not want to connect. We don't talk about those family that do not want to connect. So in this case, how do you pull this off? Because you want to connect, want to build that story so you could have that story for your children. In that case, how do you connect with that?
Uh, when you say connect, can you elaborate a little bit more what you mean? Do you mean connect with people outside of your direct line, or what do you mean by that?
No, so we have family all over the globe.
Right.
The ones that you do know do not want to connect. They
Okay.
separate themselves from others. They want
Mm.
to be, oh, I'm here, you're here, you stay away from me. But you want to connect so you can show them that, hey, I have two children. My brother has four children. So like what happened to Pastor Dorothy don't end up happening, to the rest of the family.
Mhm.
You go off
Mhm.
somewhere, you go end up marrying your cousin,
Mm.
your sister, or your this is what I.
Yeah. So that's actually outside of the realm of what I do, and it's really that's a family matter. If they don't want to connect, they don't want to connect. But the way the way to answer some of the things like you were just bringing up and Dorothy mentioned earlier was through DNA testing. But that's a whole other thing, as they say. Because a lot of these kinds of things can come out from DNA testing, but also if you read about it, sometimes it's be careful what you ask for also, because it can also share other information. So I just put that out there as if a person wants to do DNA testing, not to just do it lightly, like spur of the moment. Oh, I'm going to do that, because sometimes you might get information you don't really want to have.
Yeah, let me kind of chime in on the relatives that don't want to connect. So first of all, you got to find out the reason why
Yeah.
they don't want to connect.
Mhm.
That's the first thing. Once you know the reason why they don't want to connect, you need to find a relative that they are connecting with. Okay.
Mhm.
They've got to be the go between. Okay. So they can collect the data and stuff that you need, especially if you can't clear up whatever the problem is. Let them begin to collect the data, come back to you, and deliver the data to you. And it doesn't have to be one person, it could be two or three people. One of the things that I love about me is that I always tell my family, yeah, I mean, we all have those, what we say, black sheeps in the family. Nobody wants to be around. But
Mhm.
when the holidays come around, my house is always open and everybody is always here. We're cooking, we're eating, and what have you. So I tell them all the time, when you get to my door, whatever was stays on the other side of the door. It doesn't come on the inside. Okay. And if you don't want the African man in me to arise, okay, you won't bring it to my house. They know how I am, okay? I don't need nobody to calm the family. Definitely about family unity. If that means staying away, then fine, we can stay away. We'll just do a periodic check to make sure that you're still okay. Okay, Camille?
Yes, and
Okay.
that's a good way to look at it, because I have a few clients right now are going through a battle, and
Yeah.
I'm like, how do I fix this? I don't want to get involved, but I always tell them, when you show up at my door, you open your trunk, you drop whatever you have in the trunk in there, lock it, because when you come back out of my house, it will be still sitting there. Don't
All
bring it to
righty.
my house.
All right. Stacy, what do you got for Ruth Ann?
Well, I come at things from a business perspective and a tech perspective. So, Ruthanne, I'm wondering, how does the current social media, where the young people are posting tons of things about their lives, in fact, they may not even be aware of how much stays over time. So, do you see this way of storytelling shifting as the current generation ages? Because there's going to be so much more available, but the dots aren't necessarily connected.
So what social media allows people to do is I would use the term stories very loosely as it relates to to social media. They're for most people they're showing a very narrow snippet of their lives, I don't really consider that really storytelling. You might glean from it what a person's personality is, maybe, or their political leanings, things like that. But I I think in some ways it's unfortunate that we speak and read and listen today in such sound bites and such small snippets that that we aren't able to listen carefully and get the essence of things. We're so busy, and I mean broadly when I say we, but we are so obsessed with showing, these certain very specific aspects of our lives. But for the younger generation, this is what I was getting at earlier, though, they're not really interested right now in the stories as legacy right now. That's just not where they're coming from. They won't realize that till way later. And so that's why I say it's a gift. It's a kind of generational wealth. And somebody was asking about that. And I see in the question, that's why I consider it generational wealth. It's something that gets passed on, but you may not benefit from it till later. So the very people who are talking in snippets now, when they're, let's say, 60 or 70, they might be speaking a very different language, so to speak. They might then be taking the time to be more reflective and all of that. It's just not where a person's head is, so to speak. Social media just allows us to put out, to almost like manipulate our story in a way that we want it to be. It's not really necessarily the essence of our stories. So.
Well, I want to add something in there. I know that connecting to family members and things like that sometimes can benefit you in so many different
Ways.
ways.
Yes.
Okay. I might find out somewhere down the line there's an Oprah Winfrey somewhere in the family, you know, or a Sage Levine in the family somewhere,
Ooh.
connected in the family. You never know. My baby sister was married. Her husband's brother is a blues singer, a famous blues singer. I can't think of his name
Ooh.
now. His last name is
Nice.
Clayton, but I can't think of it. But you know, I sometimes, well, I'd say this. When my husband passed away and I went to the funeral home, come to find out, a cousin of mine was married to the guy that owned the funeral home. Okay.
Hmm.
So, guess what? That helped me as far as paying the bills, as far as the attention that I got and everything. And it was off the chart. And it was only because of the connection
Mm-hmm.
within the family. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
knew about him years and years ago, but I never had a chance to, in other words, connect with them. So I did get a chance. This past year, and it was amazing.
That's a
So
beautiful blessing. It
yeah, it
is.
was, it was.
Yes.
If
So
I could, I'd like to share a story to maybe have an example of the power of storytelling, even though, as I said earlier, the younger generation doesn't necessarily appreciate the gifts that they're given. But this will demonstrate the power of not just telling a story from an older generation to a younger generation, but also the power of making sure that that story gets preserved for future generations. So
all right.
here's the story. When my husband was about 10 years old, he was in the Scouts, in the Boy Scouts, and he went to a scout meeting for the new Boy Scouts. He went from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts. He went to a meeting with his dad. So all the boys were there with their dads, and the scoutmaster was introducing all the new scouts. And when it got to his friend Raymond's turn, now I have to tell you who Raymond was. Um, when they got to Raymond's turn, the scoutmaster said, "You're not well. Your kind is not welcome here." And when he said "you're kind," what he meant was, so Raymond was of Japanese descent, and this was in the early 1960s. So if you know about the Japanese internment camps, right, there was still a lot of resentment and bad feelings about
Yeah.
Japanese Americans, right? So that just like shut down the room, right? So Raymond and his dad were humiliated. They got up and they left the meeting. And no one spoke up. No one was
Wow.
outraged by that. So my father-in-law, my husband's father, leaned over to him. My husband's 10 years old, leaned over to him and said, "Well, if they're not welcome here, we're going with them." And
Ooh,
Ooh,
they left the meeting and they
good
never
for
went back.
them.
good for
Now,
them.
let me tell you the power of that story. First of all, it tells our children the character of their grandfather, right?
Yes.
Mhm. Yes.
It teaches them that you do the right thing and you stand up and you don't go along with groupthink just because you don't want to either make waves or not be popular. So it teaches that lesson. It shows them where their it shows our children where their father's values come from and why he does certain things and does the right thing, even though it's not always the popular thing. So just from that one story of passing that to our children
Mhm.
has so many aspects to it. And while they appreciate it now, the effect that it has on them will be with them forever. And that is a story that they will then pass down to their next generation. So I'm just using that as an example of the power of what's behind a story. So you could just say, "Oh, and we left too," and we could just leave it at that. But it's like, no, his father leaned over to his son and said, "We're going with them. If they're not well," I mean, you could picture it, right? You
Yes.
picture a father
Yes.
saying to his son, "I'm gonna, I'm not gonna tell you a lesson. I'm gonna
Show
show you
you.
values
Yep.
right now."
Yes.
And they got up and left. So that is such, to me, such a good example of the power of stories in our family. So
Wow. Wow. That's a
Oh, those that
great.
give me the chills.
I love how you're illustrating the need for story, because it's not just a history which has a layer, but it's the meaning that can represent a generation. It can change someone's perspective. So there are many layers to this,
right.
and what you just shared is a very enriched layer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and that the additional aspect of it is the historical piece of it too. It just so happens that this teaches about a moment in history as well, that if you didn't understand like what that was like, another layer of racism and all of that. So it's, yeah,
Mhm.
like you said, there's lots of layers to it.
All
Exactly.
right. So one of the things that you said is that storytelling is not just for holiday gathering. Documenting and sharing them across generations matters more than we actually know. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Okay. There are other reasons why it could literally be health reasons why we share stories in order to make sure that things are going right in the family. I think they got a commercial on where this guy is going to the doctor's office and he's saying, my grandparents died from lung cancer, my mom died from cancer, and nobody ever paid attention to it. So now I am taking it up on myself to make sure that I'm continuously checking my health all the time to
Mhm.
make sure that I
Mhm.
stay healthy. And it's something that stemmed back from his grandparents
Mhm.
that is causing him to do that. So that has a lot to do with it too.
Mhm.
So, 3 tips and how-tos. How to be ready to capture stories at any opportunity. There are 3 ways to share the family stories once you have them. So, we've got about 10 minutes. So, I'm
Mhm.
gonna let you tell us about you've basically told us about capturing the story, but there are 3 ways to share the family stories once you have them. So, tell us about those 3 ways.
Well, there's 3 ways. So 3 ways that I would share is to literally create documents where you just you have them as, I mean, they could be as simple as Word documents. I am a fan of adding pictures to them and all of that, so you can make it as complex as you want. But even just the simple task of writing it down in its most, I'll say, in its most raw form, not fancy, all of that. So that's the most basic. Another way is to create a slideshow through PowerPoint. So,
Mhm.
or PowerPoint presentation. Each slide. If you don't know how to use PowerPoint, it's really quite easy. There are lots of videos, lots of tutorials to do it. But basically, you're creating, slides. You can have a story, you can have photos, you can format it however you want. This is not a high tech, like, how am I going to learn this software kind of thing. Basically, if you can use Word, then you can, do something on PowerPoint, and you can create from that. It's very easy to make that a PDF. Then by sharing, you can just load that um, however, you can share that across various platforms. You can email it to people. You can print it out, make copies for people. So that's another simple way. One of the great things about doing it in PowerPoint is that you can also send the editable PowerPoint itself to other people in your family. And I'll give you an example, so it's not just this generic tip. When my mother passed away, my father had already passed away. So when my mother passed away, I created a tribute, what I called, and I did it in PowerPoint. And we had all the generations of the family, and we had stories and pictures of, as each of their children got a little family history. Then as each child got married, I introduced the spouse. Then we each had children, so I introduced each of the grandchildren. But if I send that now to each of my siblings and each of my nieces and nephews and my children, they can then take that and they can add on their own line. They can add in their own stories to it and personalize it to their line. So they have the bigger line, right? But then they can personalize it. So that's really a fun way where they can then take something that's already been done for them and add on, like we just had a new baby added to the family. So I would add that into my copy. They can do whatever they want. They can add 20 pictures, 100 pictures of their baby if they want into it. I would just put one because I'm adding a new family member, right? But
Great,
so that's
great.
just another way to share it. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be as complicated as we think. And there are several platforms. I don't generally use them, but others might want to. Where
Okay, we're
you
gonna have to put them in the comment because we're coming up on the hour.
Okay, I was just going to say
Okay,
people can load it and other
yeah.
families can add to it. I don't personally use them, but
Okay, so I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank you for sharing. You got a lot to share, but unfortunately, we only have an hour. Okay, so I want to, before we leave, I want to remind everyone that we're here every Friday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Central. Okay, and remember, I'm going to add to the comments the event celebrating women of influence for September the 23rd. where we will have a host of keynote speakers and panelists. We're going to network a little bit, and we're going to be playing some games. Just mark the date and the time. September 23rd, 12 p.m. We are looking forward to having you join us. I want to thank Ruth Ann for coming on and sharing with us. I want to thank the wonderful Stacy Paley for being here, the fabulous Camille Robb. I'm telling you, I have a lot of fun, but hey, we all got some things that we need to do in the afternoon, so we can't just hang on here and just hang out. So
Can I
I
make it?
am so happy that you joined us. We didn't have time for our porch talk like we usually do, but that's okay. We will add it in next week. So join us next week as we talk about getting together on the porch once again. So I'm going to invite some people to come onto the porch with us and kind of talk. We're not doing any interviews. It's not going to be about business. It's just going to be a general conversation, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Okay. So I'm Dorothy coming in from Chicago. Ruth Ann, where are you coming in from?
I am coming in from a western suburb of Portland, Oregon.
Well, I'm in Portland, Oregon also.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Ah, where do you live?
We'll talk.
That's awesome.
Camille, where are you coming in from?
And I'm coming from Orlando, Florida.
Florida.
Orlando, Florida. It's been great. It's been fine. Camille, close us out.
Camille, could I make one final statement?
Sure.
Okay. So I just want to let people know that I think you're going to mention about my download and all that. I also would want to let people know that coming up later in the month, I'm doing legacy letter webinar about being able to write a message, an expression to people that you love, your values, and what's most important to you. So if you get my download, you will automatically receive the information about this upcoming free webinars that I have later in the month. So I just want to mention that.
Great. The free gift has been added into the comments, so anyone can download it that visits, and you can go back, watch the video in any of the on any of the platforms, LinkedIn, Porch Talk Live Worldwide, Women Rocking Life, or even in WPN's Facebook groups. And Ruth Ann, you can add that workshop in there as well.
Great.
So,
And if somebody doesn't get this whole link here, you could just go to capturethejourney.com.
capturethejourney.com.
It'll be there.
That is so simple and so easy. Ladies, it's been fabulous. And
Thank
audience,
you so
thank
much.
you for dropping in. We will see you again on next Friday, 12 noon Central. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Stay blessed and stay absolutely fabulous. And we'll see you next week. Ta-ta.
Bye all. Thank you so much. Bye.